Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Usin Consulting Podcast. Let's talk everyday equity at the justice table from add-on to all in. Equity that inspires change. And my name, of course, as you know, is Anika Farrell. And I am excited to be here with you today as we talk about how exit interviews tell you why people leave and stay interviews tell you why they stay. But today we'll explore how listening deeper to employee voice can support retention of employees and support their sense of belonging and organizational culture. And this episode will also highlight how when organizations listen with purpose, both culture and retention can be transformed. So our goal today is provide you as listeners with strategies that foster retention and belonging. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this topic with this wonderful woman of power here, Zakiya Shaw Sita, Director of Human Resources at the Lake Washington School District. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I want to first say thank you. We got introduced to each other some time ago, but then she has agreed to be here with me today on this platform to hold space and have conversation about some things important to us as we think about what it looks like for us in our organizations to think about how surveys play a part, how listening to voice plays a part. And I would like for you to just, as we get started and as we get grounded, think about how in your role as a leader in a school district and a director in human resources, how you've seen, surveys or focus groups or state interviews play a part in the role of the impact of employees and staff in and out of the district.
Yeah, I love how you frame that. Thank you so much. And so I'll start off by saying the Kia Sita. So it's the Kia Sita, and I have both names on LinkedIn, so I know you referenced that. But professionally, I go by Sita. Soon to change, but that is
Oh, okay.
my today. So for us at the district, I think importantly when I think about just how you framed it, because I do wear many hats. I serve in the district as an HR director. I serve in community. I lead a nonprofit organization specifically focused on what we're talking about when we think about equity and access. And so I am going to speak from both of those as we go through the conversation today. But specifically for the district, I appreciate that we in HR are able to have access to employees from multiple touch points. Because I lead talent acquisition, I'm able to, first of all, engage with employees as they enter the district. And then also on the exit survey side, also hearing and reading just the feedback and learning, why folks leave. And we also lead new employee orientation as well. So being able to take the information that we're getting from these various touch points and plugging and upgrading and inputting that into how we engage with employees from the beginning in our orientation. And so those are the touch points that we use mostly, is really looking at the surveys, looking at NEO, because most of the time when folks attend our new employee orientation, they've already stepped foot into their role. And so we're able to hear, just those first couple of weeks, maybe it's been a month, and we do those every month, that we're able to get some feedback from employees, and then also being able to hear back from employees once right when they've started their role, because we're that touch point when they're hired. And so those are the current ways that we're doing that within the HR lens, but more specifically talent acquisition, which is the area that I oversee.
Thank you so much. So you have touch points when people first arrive. Of course, they've already stepped foot into their roles. They've already got a little bit of experience, a little footing, a little foundation. Right. And then you potentially touch base with them as part of their interviews, maybe as they're exiting their roles. You want to find out the reason why.
Exactly.
What efforts or focus areas do you have in between there? So you have the beginning, where people are, hey, we're new, but we've kind of got started. And then you have people at the end, hey, we're at the end. We're going to go on to that next journey of life. Is there anything that you do in between there that helps to gauge an understanding of where employees are in their work, in their cultures, in their environments, how they're feeling? Is there anything that you all do or you have as strategies in between there that you'd like to share with listeners that they could do?
Yeah, so I really appreciate that question because it's something that I've explored and brought to just my supervisor around just your what you mentioned, the state interview. And so what we have not actually done a good job of is that. And so that is something we're actually going to roll out, which is a 30-day stay interview. And then again, the 60 between 60 and 90-day mark, just to follow up with folks, get input, get feedback, see how things are going. What could we be, how can we better support them? What do they need in their role? Because currently, again, we're not, only time we're really hearing from employees is if something has occurred. Maybe they went to employee relations with an issue, or we're getting questions that have come up because there is a gap in just onboarding, a gap in training. And it's really very, very reactionary at this point. We have been able to use the exit survey to inform how we orient them in the new employee orientation, but that is a gap in an area of opportunity for us. So we are currently I'm drafting like what that will look like for us. So we can do a better job of ensuring that our folks are supported, questions are answered based on those stay interviews.
That is magnificent, especially when you're taking something that you don't already have into play and you're
Mhm.
trying to craft that in a way based upon what you've heard and what you've seen and experienced to try to bridge that gap with staff to ensure that they're having the best experience possible. That will create an environment where they don't want to leave. And so
Absolutely.
what have you, if you could share some thoughts around what is it that you've heard or seen that has made it where staff is like, you know what, this is the reason. These are some common reasons why we're not staying in our roles.
It varies. It's very different. And I think, you work in education. So just knowing across a big district where we have 55 schools, the culture and the onboarding and the experience looks very different depending on the building and the building leader. So, one building, they have a very high, like folks don't leave. And then we have other buildings where that is not the case. And so I would say there's a multitude of reasons, whether it's just, not having proper support or training, not really understanding their role, and what they signed up for, and it being a little bit more demanding than what they anticipated. But majority of the time, it really is just a various things that we hear. But those are some of the reasons, really just training piece, not really expecting what they signed up for to be what it is. Sometimes it's just, people are moving to a different role, a different building, cost to get there. So, folks want to work closer to home. So, some of those are reasons, childcare, so I would say it varies. It really does depending on the role and the department. But those are some of the reasons: relocation, training, onboarding, just not feeling supported in their role, not knowing who to go to, for leadership. Those are some of the reasons, but most of the time those are like a secondary reason. That's not the initial reason why people leave.
So, as you have pointed out some really good reasons, it could be a gamut of
Mhm.
reasons why people are like, you know what, I'm leaving because, this is not what I expected. I know having worked in education, oftentimes people sign up for a role in a position that they thought, hey, this is going to be what it was. And that's completely not what it was. Or it was more than or less than I expected, and so I'm leaving. But oftentimes, what I had heard, because I know for myself, I had started, focusing on different focus groups to understand the lived experiences of people within
Right.
spaces, and they're best able to tell their story. And
Mhm.
I think that's really a dynamic way for you during your stay interviews, just to understand what those storytelling
Absolutely.
opportunities about real life are.
Mhm.
Because I know people love data, they love data, and we were
Right.
able to collect that data online. Don't get me wrong. We were able to,
Mhm.
like, if we know that a lot of times our classified staff had barriers that existed for them being able to either get to a stay interview. Maybe it could be childcare, maybe it could be just transportation. So made those interviews opportunities where they could, or those focus groups opportunities where they could have conversation virtually. And so those opportunities did allow us to collect some data. But I think sometimes those listening to lived stories and experiences made really the narrative come true in their experiences. So it's wonderful to hear that you're doing that. Now, Ash, think about drafting that plan and
Mhm.
rolling that out. What does that look like for you in real life so that it brings to 55 different schools and those staff members that experience? What does that look like for you?
Honestly, so for us, just pitching the idea to begin with around just that need, what we're going to do is we're going to pilot it. So it's not something we are going to roll out mass district wide. So we are going to focus specifically on a handful of folks that we hire throughout the basically throughout the month. So we'll handpick just a few different people that we'll reach out to, basically to your point, to collect the data. What are we hearing? And then even like, what is the response? How is it going before we can then roll it out district wide? So that is the approach that we're taking, just drafting a handful of questions, giving the option for it to be, accessible. So not everyone's going to want to meet face to face or do a Zoom. So we will have the option for folks to be able to submit written responses, but we want it to be something that people are able to participate in the way that they want to participate. So we'll have the multitude ways of that folks will be able to participate. Again, scheduling out, hand picking. We only have a handful of folks in our department, so we're really small.
I
But
get
yeah,
it.
but that those coordinators, myself as a director, we have a supervisor that as well, and we all have a play a part in the hiring process for various roles. So we'll each be able to handpick just a handful of folks that will be able to pilot this out, do them for a few months, then be able to share back the data that we've received, the response rates, what are some of the things that we're hearing, and then being able to then make a decision on what could this look like and would this look like when we roll it out district wide. So that'll be the approach that we'll take to begin with, doing a small bite, but being the important part is saying like, hey, this is something that is needed, is something that is asked, and it's a way that we can then be able to roll out what does support look like, and just making sure that we have the capacity to meet the needs by doing a bite size first, and then being able to roll it out district wide.
I love that because, of course, doing, I love the way you say a bite size first. Like it's a small little nugget before you
Yes.
make it worldwide. So you try to figure it out, craft it,
Mhm.
decide what that looks like. And I think also, too, doing it in a small way help with inclusive facilitation of what those conversations look like,
Absolutely.
especially as you're expanding it out to the broader audience, and then
Right.
understanding like what do we need to change, what do we need to do, what feedback did we get, and you're setting up best practices. And I think that that's magnificent. And we know that when people feel that they can be safe to speak and share in a trusted space, no matter what those situations are, no matter what they're sharing with you, they're more likely to share more and
Yep.
be honest so that you can actually use that information to help, define, okay, now let's look at all of these 55 schools and the staff that we have in them, and then understand what that model is going to look like for them. I know you
Absolutely.
say that you have a small staff. And of course, that's pretty evident of a lot of places and spaces these days. So you're all going to have a part in that, and I love it because I
Absolutely.
was just talking to someone, and they talked about how not one person can be focused on these areas of equity. It's going to take a shift in mindset. And
Absolutely.
so I'm wondering how you, as the director, and your leading teams of coordinators and supervisors are helping to cultivate that even within your own HR department and space.
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, interestingly, I was having a conversation with another team, and again, it starts with getting the buy-in and the understanding of them. So, like sharing, hey, this is what we're rolling out, but also this is the why, this is the goal, and even getting input. I'm a collaborative leader. I love to hear what am I not seeing? What are the blind spots? What do you think? What questions should we ask? So really getting their buy-in and input on the process is the goal and the approach that I tend to lean into, because then we're all invested in the process. We're all invested in it. And so I think that will also help the outcome, because if we're all bought in when we go out to deliver, they're also going to support it, and they're also going to be able to advocate for the why. And so that is the way that I approach getting the buy-in, leading by example, but also leading in a collaborative way, because now they've given input, they've bought in, and then we can all be unified in how we deliver it out to the district and to the system. And that's the best approach, and that's the approach that I lean into in my approach in multitude of ways and multitude of projects. Yeah, so especially with change in a very big district and a system that doesn't like change. And so doing something different is going to take us really owning it, but also being the advocates for it, so we can share the why behind it and the intent behind it and the outcome that we desire.
I love that. I love that. And being a collaborative leader. Not all leaders are collaborative. You know how some leaders feel like, hey, I have the answers. This is how it should go. And then here's what I'll tell you, and then you should follow. Collaboration is amazing to hear in leadership. And it's
Mhm.
even more amazing to hear it coming from you as you are bringing in a new tool. And that new tool is to support the retention efforts that you have in your district. It is support those voices that are often silenced
Yes,
and marginalized in a lot of ways. And so when you talk about collaboration, to me, I think inclusivity. Um,
absolutely.
I think including people in the thought process, including people into those spaces, and being mindful of the voices again that often get overshadowed. And of course, you mentioned people have a hard time with change. So I think even you turning this out in a way that feels safe, yet a very broad and bold approach is amazing, because you're starting something that you haven't done before, and you hope that this stays after you. And so that is absolutely important in this work. I would love to ask if there's anything that you'd like to share with our listeners about ways or strategies or resources that you believe that they would be able to support their organizations in this, listening to the voices of the people who are employed, listening to their staff, listening to those individuals around them in order to help truly retain that wonderful, thriving, cultivated workforce that we hope to achieve. Is there anything that you'd like to share that I haven't asked already?
Mm, yeah, I mean, for me as a leader, I have someone on my team who's been with the district for 34 years. There's no way that I cannot lean into this shared knowledge approach. And that's something that is just a value of our team. And so I would say, definitely removing the hat of like director, leader, dictator, if you will, but like really
Mm-hmm.
being curious. And they have a wealth of knowledge and just institutional knowledge, but then also like really being open to hearing that, open to hearing feedback, open to yeah. So I would say for me, it's just important to remain open, remain curious, but constantly looking at process systems and looking at how can we not only build efficiencies but really improve with the end user in mind. So who is your customer? Who are you supporting? Whether it be a hiring manager, whether it be an applicant, whether it be an employee, thinking about all of those touch points and really hearing the feedback that's coming not only from external but also just within your team, because some that is valid input, it's valid knowledge, and sometimes there are things that have been done and tried before, and so really being open to hearing those critiques as a leader. So I'm someone who asks for feedback even of myself, and as how I'm approaching things, what am I not seeing, what am I not hearing. So I think just remaining open and curious is a great way to approach it. And I, like I said already, really ensuring that your purpose and the why is shared and the why is considered, and the why is something that everyone is within your team is has bought into, because it's going to be really hard to make change and to have support of the district or the system that you're supporting if your own team hasn't bought into what it is you're trying to achieve. So I think just really understanding and being clear in your purpose and your why, and ensuring that they also understand it, is really going to be key. So that's just something that I would say is just, another add. So, and then of course, any other questions I'm happy to answer, but those are the things that come to mind. Just they're just top of mind because these are conversations we've been having today. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
To be able to have things that are top of mind because there's things that you're talking about right now, than it
Mm-hmm.
is to try to think, oh, what was that thing that I thought about 6 months ago? These are
Right.
all things that are so relevant in conversations right now. And you mentioned something that I think holds really true. How do you expect a district to support something that your own departments have not bought into? That is hard to even think that would be fathomable, because
Absolutely.
that how does a whole district buy into something that your department has not cultivated and believes in and understands the why behind it? And as you talk about being a collaborative leader and one who wants to ensure that you are hearing the voices of individuals who you're connected with and who you're working with, and whether it's a coordinator, whether it's a supervisor, or you as a director,
Mm-hmm.
all of those voices matter. All of those collaborative, ways of understanding and being matter. And I think when people feel like no matter where I'm at, even in my position and role as a person who is transforming the system,
Yeah.
my voice matters too. And I
Absolutely.
loved hearing you say that, as did your own share out, because it absolutely does. If more leaders were like, you know what, I want feedback, I want to know how I'm doing, and then I'm going to take that and I'm going to assess that, and I am going to hear some of what's been shared with me in order to make the changes that I want to hope to see cultivated within my space, is so powerful. So thank you so much for that, because I think that if you're a listener, you needed to hear that. If you're a listener that's coming from one leader to another, I
Absolutely.
want to make sure that you heard that. Thank you so much, Zakia, for sharing your thoughts, sharing your space. I know we had some technical difficulties a second ago, but we made it here, and so I want to thank you so much for being here with me and my listeners. And as we wrap up, I want you as listeners to think about when organizations listen deeply, just like Zakia mentioned earlier, and act on what they hear. They don't just gather data, they build trust and connection and a sense of belonging that keeps people rooted in the culture. It keeps people rooted in the spaces and places where you want them to grow and be. So I would say, as a takeaway, don't wait for an exit interview. We talked
Mm-hmm.
about stay interviews. Ask what keeps you here, what might push you away. And then I want you to think about listening deeply to whether or not there is equity in every practice. And if there isn't, I want you to think about ways that you can implement them. So, Zakia, thank you so much.
Of
And
course.
if I got your beautiful name wrong, I am sorry about that. You are absolutely right. I did get it from our wonderful professional network, but I hear you say that it might be changing. So I will leave that alone and leave that for another conversation. Zakia, thank you so much for being here with me today. And listeners, thank you. Tune in next week for another episode of Let's Talk Everyday Equity at the Justice Table.